Hello, class. Today we'll be talking about frequency and period, along with phase shift and amplitude all together. Now, tomorrow you'll be dealing with all the four components of a trigonometric functions. So you will be dealing with frequency, phase shift, and amplitude, as well as the vertical shift. And on Thursday we'll do a review, and on Friday will be your quiz. Today we'll be going over two examples dealing with this type of topic, and you will get two questions to do for homework as well. Okay, so let's get started on this type of question. I'm elaborating on a homework question that we have done yesterday. And for the first one, we'll have a cosine, and you will get the same format for your homework and quizzes as well. So the vertical shift here will be none, and all these five components that you have here, you will have to write down for your homework. Your amplitude will no longer be one like we did last time. So in this particular case, would be a 2. Now your frequency value would be whatever is in front of x, which would be 2 here. And your new period would be 2 pi divided by your b value, which is 2. And you will get that as a pi. Now each increment is your new period divided by 4, which means it will be simply be pi over 4. And your phase shift would be pi over 4 to the left. Okay, so now with all these components combined, now let's take this and then put it into our graph. Number one, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to establish a framework. Okay, so the framework that we'll have is that in the middle will be at 0, and you go up 2, and you go down 2. And because it's a cosine, it's negative cosine, you know that it starts at minimum. And so what we are going to start off is here, if it was the original graph. But remember that we need to consider our phase shift first. The phase shift is whatever the starting point is, it needs to be pi over 4 to the left. So how much is pi over 4 to the left? Well, it turns out that because each increment is pi over 4, negative pi over 4, so I'll just write down this first, 4 pi over 4, negative 5 pi over 4. Then the other part would be pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, and then 5 pi over 4. Okay, so now all the increments have been established, and then we're going to simply take those points and move it to the left. So this point will come out to be here, and every increment is pi over 4, and it turns out that because we move phase shift to the left by the increment, it doesn't really change that much aspect of the graph. So the next pi over 4, I'm going to go to mid. Next pi over 4, I'm going to go to max, and then this will continue on and on. Ooh, that was bad. And then on and on. So the graph will look something like this. And if we continue the other portion, it will look something like that. So what you essentially get is a pi over 4, is a sine graph overall, because we are moving essentially pi over 4 to the left or the right, and that turns out to be the increment. And as we established before, cosine and sine graph is pretty much the exact same thing, with the exception of how much you're moving left or right. Okay, so now this question is completed. Now let's take a look at the next question. I would like you to try this on your own, and then once you're done, check the answers, and then that'll be it for today. Okay, so the amplitude here would be 3, because the first number here would be 3. The frequency value would be 1/2. The new period would be 2 pi divided by the v value, which is 1/2. Which means it's 2 pi divided by 1/2, which is 4 pi. So this is a very elongated graph. It will be very, very, very long. Each increment is 4 pi divided by 4, which makes it pi. And then the phase shift is pi units to the left. So here I'm going to establish every 2 tick marks to be my increment. It's negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi, negative 4 pi, negative 5 pi, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, and then 5 pi. Okay, and then this middle line would be at x-axis. Top maximum will be at 3. Bottom right here will be at negative 3 because the amplitude is 3. So we go above and below about that much. Okay, now next part is that we are having positive sign, which means it will start at mid, go to max, and then mid again. So that is the pattern. And then I need to move pi units to the left, which means my starting point would be here, because whatever that was here originally, I move it to the left. Then I go max, mid, min, max per every increment that I have. Max and then mid, and then do the other portion on this side as well, and then you would draw a really nice sine wave right like that. Now it looks like it's a cosine wave because we take the sine and we move it to the left by the increment. And like I said from the previous question we had, it's pretty much the same with the increment moving to the phase shift left by pi over 4, which it creates a sine wave. This is no exception. It creates a cosine wave if we're looking at the original perspective. And make sure your increment is set up properly for you to get a full credit on your homework and your quizzes. Okay, hope this video helped. I know this was a relatively small one because I want to divide up the topic one by one and moving up scaffolding incrementally. And tomorrow, tomorrow just be aware that we will have a vertical shift. This component will finally be added on top of all of the other trick components that we're going to be doing. Okay, thank you and have a good day.